Somewhere tonight, a man is staring at the ceiling in silence, not because he cannot sleep, but because deep down, he knows his life is slowly drifting away from him. The bills keep coming. The responsibilities keep growing. The body gets older. The energy gets lower. And the dreams he once carried so confidently have quietly become memories he no longer talks about. And what hurts the most is not failure. It's knowing he could have been more. That is the part nobody sees. People think suffering comes from losing. But for most adults, the deepest pain comes from potential slowly dying in private. You see it in fathers who smile at dinner tables while feeling emotionally exhausted inside. You see it in men driving home from jobs they hate, sitting in the car for 10 extra minutes before going inside. You see it in people who became so busy surviving, they forgot what it feels like to feel alive. And maybe that's why this quote feels uncomfortable. Successful people do what unsuccessful people are unwilling to do. Because deep down, most people already know what they should be doing. They just don't want the pain that comes with it. The pain of waking up early when the body wants comfort. The pain of discipline when nobody is watching. The pain of saying no to distractions. The pain of being misunderstood. The pain of patience. The pain of starting over at 40, 50, even 60. Most people are not destroyed by lack of intelligence. They are destroyed by emotional avoidance. That is the hidden war. Not capability, not opportunity, not talent. Avoidance. Avoiding discomfort. Avoiding uncertainty. Avoiding temporary pain. And over time, that avoidance quietly becomes identity. A man skips the workout because he's tired. Then again tomorrow. Then next week. Years later, he says, I guess I'm just not disciplined. But that was never true. He simply practiced surrender long enough until it became who he believed he was. That's how human beings slowly disappear. Not all at once. In tiny negotiations with themselves. One excuse at a time. And the terrifying part is, life rarely punishes you immediately. That's why people stay stuck for years. You can avoid hard conversations for months before the loneliness catches up. You can avoid saving money for years before panic arrives. You can avoid taking care of your health until one quiet afternoon in a hospital waiting room changes everything. Life is patient. That is what makes it dangerous. Because consequences whisper before they scream. Most people wait for catastrophe before they change. But successful people understand something early that others learn too late. The future is built in private, not in massive moments. In repeated decisions nobody applauds. That's the part social media never shows. People admire the visible success, but never the invisible sacrifice behind it. The lonely mornings, the boring routines, the emotional restraint, the endless repetition, the years of uncertainty. Discipline is not glamorous. It is deeply repetitive, and human beings naturally resist repetition unless they understand meaning. That is why so many people fail, not because they are lazy, but because modern life has trained them to chase stimulation instead of purpose. Everything today is designed to seduce attention. Endless scrolling, constant noise, cheap dopamine, temporary comfort. People no longer sit with themselves long enough to hear the truth. And the truth is often quiet. It arrives late at night, in moments of exhaustion, in empty kitchens after everyone has gone to sleep, in birthdays that feel strangely heavy, in mirrors, in silence. Sometimes the truth sounds like this. If I keep living this way, where will I be in 10 years? That question terrifies people, because deep down, they already know the answer. And this is where life becomes heartbreaking. Many adults are not living. They are coping. There is a difference. Coping looks like endless distraction, mindless routines, emotional numbness, working all day, then escaping through entertainment all night. A man tells himself he's relaxing, but he hasn't felt peace in years. He just feels temporary escape. And eventually, escape becomes addiction. Not always to substances, sometimes to comfort, sometimes to procrastination, sometimes to noise, sometimes to being busy, sometimes to excuses so old they feel like personality traits. I'm too old. I missed my chance. This is just how life is. No, that is not wisdom. That is emotional surrender disguised as realism. And Jim Rohn understood this better than most people. Jim Rohn often spoke about discipline not as punishment, but as self-respect. That changes everything. Because discipline is not really about achievement. It's about identity. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you rebuild trust with the person staring back at you in the mirror. And every time you betray yourself repeatedly, something inside begins to weaken. People feel this weakening but cannot explain it. They call it burnout, exhaustion, midlife crisis, lack of motivation. But often, it is self-respect eroding slowly over time. Because the human mind is always watching what you do. Always. It hears every excuse, every delay, every abandoned goal. And eventually the subconscious begins to say, I cannot trust this person anymore. That is why unsuccessful people often feel stuck even before life changes externally. Internally, they no longer believe themselves. And once belief dies, effort becomes painful. This is why transformation is not only physical or financial. It is psychological. A man changes his life the moment he stops asking, what do I feel like doing? And starts asking, what kind of person do I want to become? That question changes behavior at the root. Because successful people are not magically more motivated. In many cases, they are simply more willing to tolerate discomfort. That's it. They are willing to be bored, willing to repeat, willing to struggle privately, willing to delay gratification, willing to look foolish temporarily, willing to continue when emotion disappears. And that last part matters most. Because motivation is fragile. Emotion changes constantly. Some mornings you wake up inspired. Other mornings you feel empty for no clear reason. Successful people understand this. So they stop depending on emotion. They build systems, routines, standards. They act based on identity, not mood. That is why discipline eventually creates freedom. Not immediately. At first, discipline feels restrictive. But years later, it becomes peace. Financial peace, emotional peace, physical peace. Because the disciplined man suffers once. The undisciplined man suffers continuously. One suffers through training. The other suffers through regret. And regret is heavy, especially as people age. There is a specific kind of sadness that appears in middle age when a person realizes they spent decades avoiding temporary discomfort, only to create permanent disappointment. You can hear it in certain voices. People saying, I had potential. I almost started. I wanted to. Almost. One of the saddest words in the human language. Because life rarely destroys people dramatically. It usually happens quietly. A dream delayed too long. A standard lowered too many times. A fear obeyed repeatedly. Then one day a person wakes up older, wondering where the years went. Time is strange that way. When we are young, we believe there is always more of it. But eventually birthdays stop feeling exciting. They begin to feel instructional. You start realizing life is not endless. Your parents age. Your body changes. Friends disappear into responsibilities. The world moves faster. And suddenly you understand why discipline matters. Not because success is about money, but because time is finite. A disciplined life is not perfect. It is intentional. That is the difference. Intentional people suffer too. They feel anxiety too. They experience loneliness too. But there is dignity in their suffering. Because they know they are moving towards something meaningful instead of slowly escaping from themselves. And maybe this is the deeper truth nobody says out loud. People do not actually want an easy life. They want a meaningful one. Easy lives often create fragile people. Meaningful lives require responsibility, sacrifice, patience, emotional endurance. That is why some of the strongest people you will ever meet are also the quietest. Life humbled them, discipline rebuilt them, and somewhere along the way, they stopped needing applause. They learned something powerful. Self-respect feels better than temporary comfort. That realization changes a human being forever, because once someone experiences the peace that comes from keeping promises to themselves, distractions begin losing power. The man who trains consistently does not only build muscle, he builds evidence. Evidence that he can endure difficulty. Evidence that he can change. Evidence that he is no longer controlled by every impulse. And that psychological shift spreads into everything. Work, relationships, health, confidence, presence. Because identity is never isolated. The way you do one thing slowly shapes the way you do everything. This is why small habits matter more than dramatic intentions. A person who cannot control small decisions will eventually be controlled by larger consequences. That sounds harsh, but life is harsh, not cruel, just honest. And honesty is uncomfortable, especially in a world addicted to excuses. People want success without discomfort, confidence without struggle, peace without discipline, results without repetition. But nature does not work that way. A tree grows slowly. A body changes slowly. Trust builds slowly. Wisdom arrives slowly. Everything meaningful in life requires endurance. And endurance has become rare. Most people quit emotionally long before they quit physically. They stop believing, stop trying, stop imagining a better future. Not because change is impossible, but because disappointment exhausted them. That is why many adults secretly carry grief. Not grief from death, grief from becoming someone they never intended to be. A younger version of themselves still exists somewhere deep inside, wondering what happened. That thought alone can break a person emotionally, but it can also awaken them. Because as long as a person is alive, the story is still being written. And this is where hope quietly enters the conversation. Not loud optimism, not fantasy, real hope, the kind built through action. One disciplined morning, one honest decision, one kept promise, one uncomfortable conversation, one repeated effort at a time. Transformation rarely feels dramatic while it's happening. That surprises people. Movies teach us that change happens in emotional breakthroughs. Real life is quieter. A man wakes up earlier for 3 months, reads instead of scrolling, walks every evening, saves money consistently, speaks more honestly, keeps showing up, and one day, he realizes he no longer hates himself. That is transformation. Quiet, invisible at first, then undeniable. The world celebrates dramatic victories, but the real miracle is internal order, a peaceful mind, a disciplined spirit, a meaningful routine, a life no longer controlled by impulse. That is real success. Because external achievement without internal peace becomes another prison. Many wealthy people are emotionally exhausted. Many successful people are deeply lonely. Why? Because achievement alone cannot save someone who is disconnected from themselves. Discipline without meaning becomes emptiness. Work without purpose becomes burnout. That is why true success must include inner alignment. A man should be able to sit alone in silence without feeling the need to escape himself. That is power. And perhaps this is what the quote truly means. Successful people do what unsuccessful people are unwilling to do. Not merely work harder, but face themselves honestly. Face discomfort honestly. Face weakness honestly. Face fear honestly. Most people spend their lives running from inner confrontation. Successful people eventually stop running. They sit with the truth. And then slowly, they build a different life. Not overnight, not perfectly, but deliberately. That word matters. Deliberately. Because accidental living creates accidental suffering. Days become years very quickly. People think they have time, until suddenly they realize the second half of life has already begun. And the frightening thing about aging is not wrinkles. It is realizing how many years were spent disconnected from what truly mattered. So maybe tonight, this is not a message about becoming rich. Maybe it is about becoming awake. Awake to your habits. Awake to your patterns. Awake to your excuses. Awake to your potential. Because somewhere inside you, there is still a version of yourself waiting patiently. The version that knows discipline is love. The version that knows consistency creates freedom. The version that is tired of temporary comfort stealing permanent peace. And maybe the most powerful decision a human being can make is this: to stop negotiating with the life they know they need to build. No more waiting for motivation. No more waiting for perfect timing. No more waiting to feel ready. Because readiness is a myth. People become ready through action. One difficult decision at a time. One courageous morning at a time. One disciplined day at a time. And eventually, the person who once felt broken begins to feel solid again. Not because life became easier, but because they became stronger, calmer, clearer, more honest with themselves. That is the hidden reward of discipline. Not applause. Peace. A quiet kind of peace that cannot be purchased. A peace earned through endurance. And in the end, that may be what every exhausted human being is truly searching for. Not endless pleasure. Not constant happiness. Just the ability to look in the mirror and know they did not abandon themselves. Because years from now, money will matter less. Status will matter less. Other people's opinions will matter less. But one thing will still remain: the relationship you built with yourself. And that relationship is shaped every day by what you are willing to do when comfort whispers for you to stop. So tonight, while the world sleeps, someone will choose distraction, and someone else will choose transformation. Both decisions feel small in the moment, but years later, one becomes regret, and the other becomes a life.